Hello, good morning everybody. Today we're going to start with Spain in the 17th century. We're going to explain the three kings that were in Spain during that century. So we're going to start learning some words, some glossary, some important words, which meaning it will help you understand some parts of the unit. The first one is válido, and it's not válido with the tilde, it's válido. A válido is a person who was selected by the king to govern instead of him. For example, I am the king and I don't want to govern, and I choose another person to be my válido, to be the person that will govern in my position. Another word we're going to learn is regent or regente. The regente is a person who is appointed to govern the state or the country during a period of time because of the king, the assigned king, is minor phase or is incapacitated or is absent. For example, if there is a king, somebody becomes a king when in the moment he is born or where he's a very little boy or girl, usually his or her mother becomes the reina regente. That means the queen, this is the queen while the person is small, until that person is adult. The third word we're going to learn is moriscos. We already know that word from the previous unit. Moriscos are Muslims who had converted into Christianity after the conquest of Granada in 1492. Those people, they had converted into Christianity, but they kept some customs and some traditions from their Muslim culture. And the last word we're going to learn is consanguinity. Consanguinity is a quality of being descendant from the same ancestor as another person. For example, if I married my cousin, my baby will have problems of consanguinity because usually a person cannot marry their cousin and they usually have genetic problems when they are born. Okay, those are the 4 words we're going to learn that are important for our. So let's start with the first king that in the 17th century, that was Felipe III. Felipe III, as you know, his father was Felipe II. He died in 1598. Felipe III was born in 1578 and he died in 1621, but he was king from 1598. He was 20 years at that moment. And he didn't want to be a king. He didn't like to govern a country, and he was not interested in the government. So he chose a válido, another person, to help him with all the hard work. That person, who Felipe III chose, was the Duque de Lerma. So we have Felipe III, who was the king, but the person who really governed the country was the Duque de Lerma. During that period, during the government of Felipe III and the Duque de Lerma, there was a very important crisis in Spain. We have an economic crisis. It was caused because less gold and silver were coming from America. They were not getting so much gold and silver as they were getting before. There were also pirates who attacked the ships that were coming from America, and those pirates were sometimes supported by England and France, who were the enemies of Spain. England and France didn't want Spain to become bigger and more important and more powerful and richer, so they supported the pirates, and the pirates attacked the ships from Spain. And also there were lots of wars. There have been lots of wars. The wars are very expensive and they cost lots of money. So the economy was very bad in that period. And there was also a social crisis because the population decreased a lot. There was less people than before. So those was caused because there were plagues and they couldn't grow so many vegetables and so many things. There were also famines. People were very hungry because of the plagues. There was also wars, lots of wars, and that killed people. Immigration, lots of people moved from Europe to America for looking for gold and for silver and for better life. And there was also an increase of the clergy. There were more monks and more nuns, and that person doesn't have children, so the population decreased a lot. An important event that happens with the Duque de Lerma and Felipe III, a very important event happened in 1609, and it was the expulsion of Moriscos. The population of Moriscos were increasing their power, they were increasing their population because they didn't worry to work a lot and to work hard, and they wanted to keep their traditions, and the government didn't like that because they were being more powerful and the government was Christian. So the Duque de Lerma said that all Moriscos had to leave Spain. If they didn't leave, they will go to the prison or they will be killed. So more than 300,000 Moriscos were expelled and left Spain in 1609. Felipe III also started, during his kingdom, started the 30 Years' Wars. It starts in 1618, and of course, if it lasted 30 years, it finished in 1648. But Felipe III was dead in that moment. That war at the beginning was an internal conflict in Germany. It was Fernando II of Habsburg and Federico V of Germany, and they were fighting to get the territories and to get some point there. And later, Spain and other countries will get involved in that war. In 1621, Felipe III died, and his son became the new king. His son was Felipe IV. Felipe IV was born in 1605 and he died in 1665, and he was king since 1621 to 1665. So he didn't want to be either, wasn't interested in the government of the country, so he chose another Valido, who was the Conde Duque de Olivares. He was not Valido during all the Felipe IV's reign. He was only until 1643, and later Felipe IV decided to take the government and be more conscious of what he was doing. During the kingdom of Felipe IV and the Conde Duque de Olivares government, there was war with other countries, and they tried to make lots of reforms inside the country. They tried to increase the population, improving the education of people. They tried to increase the taxes and reorganize the economy. And they tried to create a common army called the Unión de Armas. And that was caused the crisis in 1640. The Conde Duque de Olivares wanted to create what they called Unión de Armas. That was a common army, an army, ejército, formed by soldiers from different parts from the different territories. From Castilla, from Portugal, from Aragon, from Catalonia, from different countries. And its territory will have some soldiers. But some territories were not very happy with that idea, and they didn't want to do that. For example, Aragon and Catalonia. The people in Catalonia rebelled against that idea, and that started the rebellions in Catalonia. Taking advantage of that rebellion in Catalonia, people in Portugal also rebelled. They wanted to be independent. If you remember, Portugal became part of Spain in 1580. But they wanted to be independent. They wanted to be part of Spain. So they started rebellion and they declared themselves independent. They were supported by France and England, who, as we said, were enemies of Spain. And their independence was not recognized until 1668. In the reign of the next king, during the reign of Carlos II. During Felipe IV's reign, there was also some foreign politics. If you remember, the 30-Year Wars had started in 1618 and it finished in 1648. We said that it started as an internal conflict between Fernando II of Habsburg and Federico V, and some countries get involved. Fernando of Habsburg was supported by Spain, of course, because Felipe was a Habsburg too, and Federico V was supported by the enemies of Spain, France and England. The war finished in 1648 when they signed the Treaty of Westphalia, and in that treaty, Spain lost most of the territories in Netherlands and other parts, except the territory of Flanders. As we said before, from 1643, Felipe took more control of his government, and he started governing his country by himself without the help of the Valido. And he was a person who loved art. He had a big collection of paintings, the most important of Europe in the moment. And he also had some court painters like Diego Velázquez, who was a person who was painting for the court. That's a court painter. And Velázquez made some pictures from the king, like, for example, Las Meninas. Felipe IV died in 1665, and his son, Felipe Carlos II, became the king. But in 1665, Carlos II was a baby. Carlos II had been born in 1661. He was king in 1665, so he was only 3 years old. And he was a very weak person. When he started growing, they thought he was not being able to be the king and that he would die very soon. But a 3-year-old person cannot be a king because they are not old enough to be a king. So his mother, Mariana de Austria, was the regente, the regent queen, until 1675, when Carlos II was old enough to be the king. They called Carlos II El Hechizado because of all the health problems he had, and that was because his consanguinity. Lots of his grandparents and his grandparents were married some of them married their cousins, some of them married their niece. So there was a lot of genetic problems that were increasing during the time, and Carlos II had very bad problems. Remember that we said before that during the kingdom of Mariana de Austria, during the regency of Mariana de Austria, the independence of Portugal was recognized in the Treaty of Lisbon, El Tratado de Lisboa, in 1668. Carlos II decided to get experts in some of the different materials, and he put them in the government. So that made that the economy improved. The previous kings had chosen his friends that were nobles and that were important persons in the society, but they were not experts in the different aspects. But Carlos II decided to choose experts, and that made things go a bit better. He married 2 times, but he didn't have children. They said that he was infertile, he couldn't have children. And in 1700, he died without hair. He had no girl, no boys, no children at all. Usually a king, when he has a son, the son becomes the king. But if a king doesn't have a son, there's nobody to be the king. And that led to a war of succession, a war to decide who was going to be the next king. In that war, there were 2 points. Carlos, before dying, he was supporting Felipe de Anjou, who was Bourbon, and he was the grandson of Louis XIV, the king of France, and Carlos II's sister, Maria Teresa de Austria. And he was a Bourbon. That was another dynasty in Europe of kings and queens. But his mother, Mariana, supported the Archduke Carlos de Austria, who was his niece. And Archduke Carlos de Austria was supported also by France and England. All this created a war between one part and the other part, fighting to decide who was going to be the king. I will tell you what will happen during that war in another opportunity, but you just have to remember that Carlos II was the last king from the Austrian dynasty. So now you have a hint of who won. Okay, thank you very much for listening. I'll see you next time, and I hope to see you very soon in the classrooms.